The fat lady is tuning up the band, but she can't let it out just yet when it comes to Antonio Brown and the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is another episode of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I am your host, Mike Asti, coming at you from the Beaver County Auto Studios up above Market Square here in downtown Pittsburgh. And I'm here to tell you why it's absolutely tremendous that Art Rooney II and the Pittsburgh Steelers brass finally has reached the point that myself and many others reached months ago, and finally feels enough is enough, and finally agrees, along with Antonio Brown, the little meeting that they had, that both parties need to divorce and both parties need to move on. They finally had the meeting. Little picture. It kind of summarized things. Antonio Brown, black and white to maybe not highlight the little blonde Fu Manchu type of mustache, Hulk Hogan whiskers that he has on his face there. A colleague of mine put that tweet up. Was this black and white image just to maybe throw off and be more serious because he realizes the blonde mustache is so ridiculous and you can't be serious with that in an image? I don't know, but kind of funny to think about. And Art Rooney II, their little picture, they're posing that everything is fine now, it's hunky-dory, we came to an understanding, we hashed out our differences, he appreciates Art Rooney for everything he's done for him, but both sides now finally agree they need to move on. And I was there months ago. Check the date. SteelersNow.com, that's where that's posted in Pittsburgh Sports Live, where the archive still stands on our YouTube channel. Mic Drop, one of the golden quality episodes of mine months ago when this drama first kind of started to erupt. Around week 17, Steelers must trade Antonio Brown. Because I knew where this was going to go. But we all know where it's been. We know the social media antics, as recent as just a day or so ago, where Antonio Brown does a Instagram Live. One of the places I'm not blocked. He blocks me on Twitter, but doesn't block me on IG. And professes that now he needs to be called Mr. Big Chest. And I saw a little tweet there with SpongeBob and the whole ripping of the chest, and that's funny. But unlike others, and I love saying this sarcastically, Mr. Big Chest, but unfortunately, Mr. Big Chest, I'm not going to call you Mr. Big Chest anymore. That's it. No more Mr. Big Chest, because it kind of symbolizes the mental lunacy of Antonio Brown from missing the MRI, from quitting on his team in Week 17, from dragging this offseason, from requesting a trade, to ignoring everybody involved with the Steelers, to where we are now. I'm not going to detail that anymore because there's past shows here, Pittsburgh Sports Live. There's past articles, SteelersNow.com, and really everybody and their brother with Steelers coverage detailing that for you. But just because everybody, and here's kind of the point of this dropping of the mic, this episode here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, just because they've had this understanding and the Rooney family finally agrees they need to move on from Antonio Brown, he's wanted to break up with you for months. He's publicly disrespected you. He said he wants to move on. He said he doesn't want you any longer. But you, as the bitter ex-girlfriend or boyfriend, kept chasing him. Even after he didn't want to meet with you in Florida, you still go down there and convince him to meet with you, and then you get to where we are now. And I detailed that on a past show on how the Steelers just look pathetic, really, in chasing a guy who doesn't want you. And any fan that still wants him kind of looks pathetic. And it's time now to just want to be rid of Antonio Brown. But here's the trick. They're not going to release him, and they shouldn't. The Pittsburgh Steelers absolutely should not release Antonio Brown. His social media antics, his appearances and interviews where he looks like he's high out of his mind, and his disrespectful comments and the fact that he's throwing everybody under the bus, Ben Roethlisberger, Mike Tomlin, and letting it fly on the inner workings of, and his problems with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I don't even know what he had to tell Art Rooney II behind closed doors because he told all of us publicly. Art Rooney II can just go on Twitter and figure things out and what's in Antonio Brown's head and what his problems are, like all of us. But regardless of what he may have told him also privately, and the fact that Antonio Brown's problems with the Steelers are so public that it's been so well documented, and we know where we are now, that everybody else in these other teams know too. But the Steelers aren't gonna capitulate, for a vocab term there. They're not going to give him what he wants, because all of that in what he's been doing is probably either that he's just crazy, and that's absolutely possible. I'm sure there's some mental instability there. Or he wants to force to be released. Antonio Brown wants to be released. He doesn't just want to be traded. He wants off the Steelers, clearly. He wants to break up, but he also wants to be released. Antonio Brown wants to decide where he can go. He wants to act as a free agent. Even though Antonio Brown's not. And even though they agree they want to move on, the Steelers and now him, and finally the Steelers get to that point, and they agree they want to move on, and this relationship is over, and they are going to now divorce. They made it so it wasn't an annulment based on the meeting, trying to fix things, but they need to divorce anyway. That Antonio Brown can't decide where he wants to go now, and the Steelers have made this clear. They're not going to release him. They're not going to give him what he wants, clearly. This is all about trying to get released. He'd rather be released than traded and have some control of where he can go. He's talking in interviews at NBA All-Star Weekend where he's saying, this team can call me if they want to pay me more. If they got that guaranteed money and that proper chemistry and there's no problems there, I'll go there. And you call me, and you call me, and talking to teams, call me, call God. Well, the Steelers, one little news bit from their meeting, they denied the request from Antonio Brown and Drew Rosenhaus and his agent to be able to speak to teams. So Antonio Brown can say all he wants, that he wants to hear from teams, and he wants teams to call him, and he wants to go to this team, and he wants to be a San Francisco 49er, to take over the legacy for Jerry Rice, who's his idol. He wants to play here. He doesn't want to go here. Doesn't matter. The Steelers are not going to cooperate. They're not going to release him, and nor should they ever. They should never release him. If they somehow do, because this gets even worse, and it could, every day this man's on social media, it could get worse. But they're not going to release him, and they shouldn't. You can't give him that type of control, and you can't get nothing back for a guy of this value who is the best receiver in football when on the field. But he wants released. This is all about him trying to get released. That's probably where this is headed. At least a directive from his agent. I'm sure they want him released to be able to act as a free agent. But they didn't cooperate. The Steelers aren't going to let that happen. Colbert, Art Rooney, they're saying no to that. Good. They're not going to let that happen. So then it gets to this problem. It gets to round things out here. That this is far from over, because since the Steelers are not going to release him, and nor should they want to get some value back, even though they finally agree they need to move on from Antonio Brown. It took them having a meeting face-to-face to get there. I got there months ago. But they agree this needs to be a divorce. They need to move on. Antonio Brown clearly wants gone. He wants on a new team. The Steelers are not going to release him. They're not going to give him what he wants and cooperate to what he's been doing through his social media antics. That means all of this, the last few months, everything I've detailed on past shows on Pittsburgh Sports Live and is all with you in SteelersNow.com. So I don't have to go into it here. It's all there. You can find it and click subscribe. Click subscribe while you're there. See? Click subscribe while you're there. Is that now he's actually making this more of a problem in terms of the future, because every drama that we've dealt with Antonio Brown, even though both sides now finally are for the first time, everybody's on the same page, the Steelers and Antonio Brown. They need to move on. This needs to be over. There needs to be a parting of the ways. Okay, great. We're finally here. But now to move on is going to be more difficult than you would think. They need to move his deal to another team with 3 years left, get some type of equal value back, and have teams interested in wanting him despite everything that's gone on. Easier said than done. Easier said than done. Because even here, Antonio Brown, not holding back on what he's looking for in a new team. He wants chemistry. He doesn't want any locker room cancers. He wants money. He wants a happy and a winning atmosphere, and that's just summarizing what he said there. You can read it on your own. But again, he's not a free agent, and they're not going to make him one. They're not going to release him, nor should they. But those comments of this is what I want more money now, even though he, unlike Le'Veon Bell and his issues, Antonio Brown got paid by the Rooneys. He got his money. Him dictating what he wants, him bringing up money now, him throwing everybody under the bus, him quitting on his team in Week 17, him ignoring his owner who did pay him, and the franchise and the team, and the quarterback and his teammates. Him getting this drama now, this is Terrell Owens with the Philadelphia Eagles and then some. It's almost worse. And also being 31 years old. And having a great year last year that was actually lower than his normal standards despite being a great year, but a little dip from where he was in past seasons. It's going to be hard. I went through this on a past show, Possible Destinations for Antonio Brown. Go search it. And it did well in views. It might come up in a standard search. But in all honesty, think about this. It needs to be a first-round pick, you'd figure, because Amari Cooper went for a first-round pick, and he's not as good as Antonio Brown. The San Francisco 49ers, the team he wants to go to, they have the number 2 overall pick. Great. They're not going to trade that for AB. They're not going to give up the number 2 overall pick for Antonio Brown when absolutely he's a great player and can help them now. But as I detailed before as well, receivers a position you can replace, receivers a position you can develop. You can find receivers without having to give up that much for them easily. You don't need to have a Randy Moss or a TA to win championships. Neither one of them actually did. And they're a team that needs a lot. They need a whole heck of a lot, especially defensively, help on the line. Garoppolo, you figure, is going to be healthy next year and can actually give him a franchise quarterback, but that's still a question mark because he's only started 7 games and was a backup most of the time with New England. He had that nice little run, but that's it. That's all we know at the end of his first season off the trade. So they need more. They can't do that. They're not going to do that. Then they pick early in the second round, but are you going to take a second-round pick and that's it? It'll need to be a second-round pick and probably then a player. But how's that going to really work? Does that really benefit the Steelers? They're probably going to want a first-round pick. The Carolina Panthers make a whole lot of sense. Give Cam Newton that weapon when he's healthy. He needs another premier receiver, needs more than Christian McCaffrey to help him as he's been declining the last few years. His completion percentage continues to dip. It's below 60% most of the time, and he needs help. A weapon like AB could help him. They might even get along personally. However, they're only picking 16. You're telling me the Steelers are going to give up Antonio Brown to jump 4 picks? The Steelers draft 20. It's not that much different. The Green Bay Packers have been brought up a lot, and they make a lot of sense. They have picks to move. They have value to give. Aaron Rodgers desperately needs some wide receiver weapons. They pair him with Adams, a younger player. It'll help his emergence. It'll be like Juju and AB and help to open up spots, and AB probably gaining double coverage. It'll make Adams even better. And Rodgers throws a great deep ball that'll help spread out the offense, make it more explosive. And AB would probably love playing with Aaron Rodgers, even though he might not like the weather in Green Bay. He didn't like the weather in Pittsburgh either. He could still go down to Miami a lot. But number one, that's a franchise that's similar to the Steelers. They're not going to put up with as much crap as AB is ditching out. It's a historic franchise that doesn't usually love to deal with diva players. That same franchise turned down a trade for Randy Moss before he went to New England because they didn't want to deal with the problem that was Randy Moss at that time. They don't have a history of doing this. They don't like those type of players in AB. And they haven't been a franchise either that brings in players off of trades or free agency except for a few others. But Charles Woodson, Peppers, that's about it. They don't like doing this. It's not common for the Packer franchise to bring in a troubled player. Probably not going to happen. And they would probably need to give up their first-round pick as well. But again, not a crater of a jump for the Steelers. It's a nice one, better than the Panthers. Not great. And then every other team, either it's not that much of a jump, they don't need a wide receiver. They've had these public grumblings now, from anonymous GMs, that now they're having issue with AB's actions the last few weeks and his personality that maybe they previously wouldn't have because it's got this bad since AB's played his hand relatively poorly. He had some leverage, but he wanted to get himself released. He didn't want to just go with the trade and just request it and let that be. The Steelers didn't want to cooperate. They wanted to try to fix things. Both parties handled this wrong in ways. They let this get so bad now. The Steelers had to know that AB was never going to change. He always was going to want to be gone. And the longer that he was on the Steelers, the trade didn't happen. The longer that this went and they didn't cooperate with him, that he could act up and be more of a fool as things went on. And that is what happened. And AB wanted to be released, and that's it, but they're not going to do that. They're not going to let him talk to other teams. They're going to control him. The Steelers are going to control him and figure out where he's going to go, but they're going to part ways. Finally. Okay. It's easier said than done to wrap this up. It's easier said than done. And I've gone into detail again in past shows in further detail, but just quickly here, it's going to be difficult. More difficult than you think. So even though both parties finally agree they need to move on, even though as you see from this tweet from Adam Schefter, they finally agreed. Art Rooney II was there, Kevin Colbert was there, Omar Khan was there, Steelers executive. Art Rooney II. Drew Rosenhaus was there, ironically T.O.'s agent back in Philadelphia as well during that era. Drew Rosenhaus always somehow involved in these things with diva receivers, but he made a lot of money off of them. And AB. And they finally agree that they need to move on. They finally agree. When they sealed it with an image. There it is. They sealed it with a photo. Instagram photo. Black and white, too. Then you know it's really official. Goes on social media and it's black and white. Then you know it's official. Doesn't mean this is going to be easy. Doesn't mean this is over. Doesn't mean the drama is over. I'm sick of talking about him. I'm sick of covering him. I feel like for 3 months, all my work on Pittsburgh Sports Live has been about Antonio Brown, or most of it. But I'm dealing with what the Steelers are giving me. I'm dealing with what the offseason is providing. And it's not over yet, unfortunately. I'm sick of it. You're sick of it, I'm sure. But it's not over yet because it's going to be harder than you would think to get rid of Antonio Brown. Now, I want to make this clear. Some team will be interested. He's a great, great player. He's the best receiver in football on the field. Some team will be interested. Someone will be interested. He's not going to have to retire. He won't be sitting on the streets with 3 years left on his deal. And maybe the Steelers can work out something where they restructure it, they give him more money, but they're not really paying it. Another team would pay it, and they take the deal, and they do some finagling. Maybe. But why give it? Who's going to actually want to give him more money? I mean, based on what's gone on. He has a mega deal. It's not Bell. He got paid and then still acted up. Exactly what Ryan Clark said would happen with many former teammates. Jeff Reed, Emmanuel Sanders said would happen, which I also detailed in a past show. And now it's just up to how do they move on? When do they move on? Where does Antonio Brown move on to? Not going to be released. Better not be released. Can't be released by the Pittsburgh Steelers. They shouldn't do it. They can't do it. They got to get value back for Antonio Brown, as he is the best receiver in football on the field, regardless of what's going on upstairs, which is a screw looser too. And they're not going to cooperate with Drew Rosenhaus and Antonio Brown's request of being able to speak to teams, being able to negotiate a new deal or his position or what's going on with a new team. No, the Steelers are going to keep control as they should. They finally agree they both now need to move on, but it's going to be easier said than done to have that moving on happen. It's going to be easier said than done to find a partner because we have a blueprint here. T.O. and Randy Moss didn't go for first-round picks. They're Hall of Famers, two of the three best receivers in football history, and they went team to team because of drama. Chad Ochocinco, elite at that time. These guys didn't go for first-round picks. They didn't go for first-round picks. Amari Cooper did this past year, but maybe that's not going to be indicative of anything else because that was the Cowboys, that was the Raiders. Cowboys were just so desperate, and it helped them get into the playoffs. Sure, it was a great move, one of the best moves of this past season for any team. But there also weren't all the other crap attached to Amari Cooper. It was just about him on the field. AB has a lot more to deal with now, and Antonio Brown's handling of this, while he really wanted to get himself released and be able to talk to teams and handle it as a free agent, the Steelers won't cooperate. They're not going to let that happen, nor should they. So he's not getting what he wanted, and he let this get out of hand. He handled this improperly, even knowing he wanted out of there and was going to be a fool, but didn't get what he wanted out of it. The Steelers kind of won it because they keep his control, but they wanted to keep him on the team. They wanted to win with the best receiver in football, and that's not going to happen. They finally came to terms with what I came to terms with, and many of you came to terms with months ago. And anyone who did not was living in denial and getting borderline pathetic at this point. Because he wants to break up with you, he wants to move on. Don't chase him any longer. But it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to see an end to this. It really, really is. They can't take a third or fourth round pick or just get ripped off. They can't release him. There's not many options in the first round. Maybe the second round. Maybe the Niners early second round and a pick and another pick and another player and something. Maybe the Niners will do that. I think that's probably the best scenario right now for the Steelers, and that gets them in the NFC, so you get them out of the division. They already made this clear, and I said this on a New England radio show the other day when I was on to, again, anytime I wanted a Steelers guest on these other programs, it's talking about Antonio Brown. I'm now a therapist this offseason, is that the Steelers are not going to trade him to anyone in the division, the Bengals, Browns, or Ravens, and some of those teams could use wide receiver help and maybe would be desperate enough to give up high-level pick. Nor the New England Patriots, who have the dynasty and beat the Steelers a lot in recent memory. Weirdly, not this past season, but a lot, and they're the reigning Super Bowl champions. They're not going to help them any longer, despite the weird reports that are kind of interesting now, that they were heavily interested in Odell Beckham Jr. last offseason and really tried to trade for him, which made the Giants pull back, but the Patriots won a Super Bowl anyway. So they don't need the Randy Mosses. They won Super Bowls without that type of player. And maybe the Niners. Maybe that's the team if you're willing to take the early second-round pick. But they're not going to trade the number 2 overall pick. A lot of the other teams don't fit, don't make sense. It's not much of a jump for the Steelers. Or they don't have the need, they don't want to do it. From what we're hearing now, on anonymous reports from other teams, from the national media reporting, from what I'm even hearing in my tentacles around the Steelers, from what's out there in the public, this should have been a situation where the Steelers wanted to get rid of him months ago. They should have agreed they had to move on and enough was enough prior to this. And Antonio Brown, if he should have realized that I'm not going to get released because they're not stupid, so I just want out off this team and a trade would be fine. He wanted to force to be released. They wanted to keep on trying to get him on the team, even though that was never going to happen. We get to this point now. We're finally moving on. Everyone finally agrees they need to move on and divorce. But now, it's not the end of the saga yet. It's not the end of the line yet, unfortunately. It's the end of the line for this program, though, this edition, even though I'm sure there's going to be many, many more shows about this, and we still got Le'Veon Bell now. That finally kicked off in terms of a day that you could tag him if you want, and you could deal with what you want to do there with him if you want. He's technically not free either. Oh, as we record this, it's his birthday, so happy birthday to Le'Veon Bell. I know exactly how you are celebrating. Maybe somehow, AB and him will get back together someday on some new team, and boy, what a fiasco that will be then. This has been, though, another Radio Gold edition of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, coming at you from the Beaver County Auto Studios up above Market Square here in downtown Pittsburgh. I was your host, Mike Asti, and the Antonio Brown saga, the Antonio Brown and the Pittsburgh Steelers relationship, it's not yet over. It's not yet over. They finally agree on how this needs to end, but it's not yet over. And I will hope and pray with the rest of you. I will hope and pray with the rest of you that this finally comes to an end soon, because I even told my girlfriend, I'm just sick of the guy now. I want him gone. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of covering it. I'm sick of talking about it. So if you're sick of hearing about it from me, I apologize. I'm dealing with what's provided to me, and it's what I got to work with right now. Make sure to check out our family of networks, though. Go over to PittsburghSportsNow.com, PittsburghHockeyNow.com, Pittsburgh Soccer Now, and our new venture, Steelers Now, where you can find all our Steelers coverage, which admittedly is a lot on Antonio Brown, but hopefully we can move on from that. Click subscribe on the little subscribe button right there. Pittsburgh Sports Live. Make it easier for us to get this content to you. You can also follow us on Twitter at PGH Sports Live on Twitter for Pittsburgh Sports Live, at PGH Steelers Now on Twitter for Steelers Now, and, of course, at Mike Asti 11 for my Twitter. Yeah. Need to towel off. Need after that one and after all the AB shows. I know. Maybe someday I'm gonna write therapist also, psychologist. I'm gonna put it on the resume. Thanks to Antonio Brown.